Okay, so what I'd like to do is go over the practice DOK demonstration of knowledge number 5, functions. And in the earlier demonstration of knowledge, we had done this this example here, where we had made a loop to iterate through asking a user for input, and if the user input a value, we would then get the sum of that value and the average and then return it. We would also account for if the user just hit the enter key, then we would break and exit the loop, so that way we'd know that the user was done. And so this was the code of that for that demonstration, and I went over this before, so I'm not going to do it again. So the assignment was to take this code and turn this into a function, or at least put it in a function to demonstrate that you understand how functions work. There's a lot of different ways we could do this. I'm just going to do a couple of really simple ways to demonstrate two types of functions. One is the void function that returns no value, and the other is a value returning function. Okay, so I'm just going to be copying and pasting this code and converting it to a function. So I'm going to move this off to the right. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, this is how I always start my code, is we need to define the main, and this is going to be the main function. And we always do this. We always declare the main function and set it up. Okay, and although this part here isn't necessary, I always like to put the return, because a function should always have a return. It's part of the function. Okay, so the other thing that I normally do is I will go ahead and do this part here. I like the way that that came up. Let's see here. So if underscore, and it comes up right away, so that's nice. Love PyCharm. And I'm going to explain this piece of code here in a minute. Okay, so what this does, line 7, this tells us that it's telling the compiler, this little piece of code here is telling the compiler that the entry point into our script is the main function. So sometimes you'll see people just do this and just call the main function. But the proper way to do it is line 7. You want to do it in this format. Okay. And another thing that I'll always do is, not always, but mostly, and it's a good idea to do it, is to go ahead and test your structure, make sure that this all makes sense and that it works. Okay, let's clear that out. Okay, so right here we have the practice DOK 5. Let's see here. We want to run this. Let's do run practice DOK 5 example. And we can see that test is output right here. So I know that my little structure worked. We're good. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, I don't need that anymore. Now I'm ready to do some other things. Is we are going to define some values. So remember, the goal is to convert this into a type of function. So let's do that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare in the main some values. So we're going to use the n0, and this is really our counter. That's what that's going to stand for. And then the sum underscore n, which is going to equal, the sum. And yes, Python has a sum function built in, but we're just going to use this right here. And that's because I want you guys to practice understanding what's going on before we look at built-in functions. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the structure of our first of our code here. So remember, we have this. I'm going to copy that over. So let's go and do that right now. So that's just a copy of that. And the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to capture some other things here. Let's see, what else do I need to do? I'm going to need to make some new functions. All right, let's do that. And so the first one I'm going to do is going to be called the calculate, and this is just me making things up. The average. Calculate average is going to be what I'm going to call this one. We're going to take the sum underscore n, and what else? Then we're going to, well, let's go ahead and set up the actual template. Okay. And here we're going to say, what is the average equal? All the average equals the sum and divide by n. Okay, so I think we're good here. All right, so clearly this is a simple enough little equation that could be back in here, you know, the way that we had it originally. It could just be part of the main function. But this is just to demonstrate how to build a value returning function. That's all this is for. So here we created a function called calculate average. It's taking two arguments or two parameters, and we're going to then calculate the average using those two parameters, and then we're going to return the average back to wherever it was called. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here, let's see, is we're assuming that the user wants to enter data, so let's work in this little block here, because if they don't want to enter any data, then we break and we're done with the loop. So the next thing we're going to do here is we need to keep track of the iterations, the number of iterations of the while loop, and so we need to do that there. Okay. The next thing is we're going to we need to convert this or cast this right here into a float, because that's how we'll be using it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say get user number. Yeah, we can do that. And we're just going to do this right here. We're going to assign it as a float, and then we're going to paste that in. That's it. Yeah, that should work. Okay. So now we have get user number is going to equal the string and cast it to a float so that we can actually use that value. Next, we need to keep track of the sum, so let's do that. And the next thing we need to do is we need to come, let's see. Okay, so we need to come out of scope of the while loop, and we're assuming that the while loop has been completed, and we need to calculate average now. So to get average, we're just going to call the calculate. Actually, we're going to set average. We're going to take the variable average, and we're going to call the calculate average function that we created, and we need to pass it some values. So we're going to pass it the sum n, which is what we need, and we're going to pass it n. Okay, so here, this is a value returning function. Let's go. There we go. And my puppy dog's just joined me, so if you hear these little noises, it's my dog wanting attention. Okay, the other thing that we're going to do, so that's this. The other thing that we need to do, and we're just going to leave that alone for right now, is we need to create another function, because I want to give an example of a void function, one that returns nothing. And so we're going to have one that, and again, this would be easy to do in the same main function, but we're going to do it this way just to do a demonstration of the functions. So here, we're going to pass it some variables. And those of you that know me know I'm terrible at multitasking, which is why I have a difficult time talking and typing, but got to do it. Okay, and so here I'm going to just format a little bit, do an empty print just for formatting, and we're going to put some context in here. So let's say sum, and over here we're going to give it the sum in because we want to output this stuff. And then I want to say, let's give it a space, average, and then let's see, average. No, I don't want that. And then that'll do it. And I think at this point we can just say return Now you'll notice that these two functions are very different. The calculate average function is taking in two parameters, and it's doing some calculations, and then it's returning the average. The next one I'm using just for, wait, I didn't do that right, did I? The next one I'm doing as a, as just a print to console function. And so here we have print to console is what I'm calling it, and it's just going to take care of my prints. This is the printing part. So print the sum, and we're going to print whatever the sum was, an average, and we're going to print that out. Yes, of course, it would be simple to just keep this up in here like we did in the original problem. But again, we're doing this just to demonstrate the functions. So this right here is a value returning function, and this next one here is a this is a void function. We're not going to return anything. We're just doing some stuff. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is from the main, we also need to call that print, and so let's do that. And we're going to call print to console and pass it the values. I think that's it. Okay. And let's give that a space so that PyCharm's happy. Alright, what does this want? We're going to leave that alone. And what's this one? We're going to leave that alone also. Alright, so we have our setup here. Let's see, we still need our variables to sit inside the main, and the main is going to handle the while loop. We're going to ask for these for an input. If the user presses enter or returns a null value, or not null value, but an empty string, we're going to break out of the loop, and then we're immediately going to calculate the average in the print to console. Otherwise, we're going to increment the number of iterations. We're going to assign the get user number, and we're going to cast whatever the user entered into a float. Remember, in the input statement right here, whatever the user enters is cast by Python as a string. That's why I used the get username underscore string, so for you guys to know that this is a string value. But we want, if they didn't enter an empty value, we need to cast this as a float so that we can now use it mathematically. So now we have get use number, and it's going to be a float, this cast to a float. And we are going to sum things. So for sum, which starts out at 0, we're taking the get user number, and we're just going to keep adding it to itself so that we always know what the sum of those numbers are. And next, we're going to, once they hit break, we are going to kick out of the while loop. We're going to go to average. Average is going to equal the function calculate average passed these two values. Calculate average down here is going to calculate the average and return the average. That average is going to be assigned to average. And then we're going to pass print average and the sum to the print to console function right here. Print to console is going to take those two parameters, and it's going to print them out. That's it. All right, so let's do this now. So we get our little thing that says enter something. So let's just enter 1, 2, 3. Now I'll just hit the enter key, and we have our sum, which is 6, which is correct, and our average, which is also correct. So there you have it, our entries and our sum and average. This line right here represents the output here. Okay, so that was a really simple example of how to create a function, how to take this right here, this script of code, and convert it into a function. Granted, it's a little unnecessarily complex because, again, I want to demonstrate how to create a value returning function and how to create a void function. But both of these are being called from the main function. The calculate average is called right here, and the print to console is called right here. So line 15 and 16 are where these two are called from. And remember, line 32 tells the compiler where the entry point into this script is. And the entry point is right here in the main. All right, that was it. Happy coding.